words reverberated through the courtroom like a clap of thunder on a clear day, causing Judge Thompson to pause his perusal of the case files and peer over his glasses. 9-year-old Ethan Carter stood beside his mother, Sarah, his voice slicing through the formal silence of the family courtroom with an unexpected sharpness. Sarah looked at her son with a blend of pride and anxiety, while across the room, his biological father, Mark Reynolds, nearly choked on his coffee. "Your Honor, I am my mother's advocate," Ethan declared, his small frame radiating a confidence that belied his age. "I'm sorry, young man, but this is a legal proceeding involving adults," Judge Thompson replied, his tone strained with forced patience as he regarded the boy who had dared to interrupt a high-stakes custody battle. "I understand, Your Honor, but according to Article 12 of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, ratified by the United States, I have the right to express my opinion on matters that directly affect me." Ethan adjusted his glasses and opened a well-worn notebook, filled with his handwritten notes. "And this case definitely affects me." A heavy silence enveloped the courtroom. Mark Reynolds, a wealthy businessman clad in a tailored suit that likely cost more than Sarah earned in a year, exchanged bewildered glances with his two high-priced attorneys. No one had prepared for a child to quote international law in such a setting. Sarah Carter worked tirelessly as a nursing assistant, juggling 2 jobs to provide for Ethan on her own. In the 8 years since Mark had discovered he was a father, he had made only 4 fleeting appearances in Ethan's life, each time bearing extravagant gifts but empty promises. Now he sought full custody. "Your Honor," Mark's lead attorney, Dr. Collins, interjected, adjusting his tie nervously. "This is highly irregular. The child lacks the legal capacity to—" "Your Honor," Ethan interrupted, his calm demeanor unsettling the adults in the room. "If you truly cared about my well-being, you want to hear what I have to say rather than trying to silence me." Mark leaned in to whisper urgently to Dr. Collins, but Ethan pressed on, flipping through his notebook with deliberate movements. "Your Honor, I prepared a documented presentation on why I should remain with my mother, including evidence of my father's true motives." He paused, locking eyes with Mark for the first time. "Motives that I believe the court will find enlightening." Mark's face paled. What had this boy uncovered? How had he managed to prepare better for this hearing than his millionaire father and his team of lawyers? In that silent courtroom, everyone bore witness to something extraordinary. A child armed with secrets capable of dismantling a facade built on lies. If this story of courage and intelligence resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. For what Ethan was about to reveal would not only change his life, but also reshape the way the justice system regards the voices of children forever. Dr. Collins quickly regained his composure, as any seasoned lawyer would. "Your Honor, while we admire the child's creativity, this court deals with complex family law issues that require adequate legal representation. Then why didn't you provide one for me?" Ethan shot back, closing his notebook with a decisive snap that echoed through the hushed room. In the last 8 months of this case, no one thought it important to hear the opinion of the person most affected by this decision. Mark shifted uncomfortably in his chair, visibly rattled by the boy's calmness. Ethan seemed unfazed by the formalities, the expensive lawyers, or even the imposing presence of his biological father. Sarah watched her son with a mix of pride and fear. For weeks, Ethan had returned home from school with strange books, legal codes, manuals on children's rights, court precedents. She had assumed it was mere academic curiosity from a bright child, never imagining he was preparing for this moment. "Your Honor," Dr. Collins continued, "my client, Mark Reynolds, is seeking custody because he is genuinely concerned about his son's welfare. Ms. Carter, while well-meaning, simply does not have the resources to provide the educational and social opportunities that a gifted child like Ethan deserves." "Interesting," Ethan muttered, flipping through his notes. "Genuine concern. May I share some fact about this so-called genuine concern?" Judge Thompson, who had presided over countless custody cases, had never encountered a situation like this. On one hand, he had strict protocols to follow. On the other, this child displayed an articulation and preparation that surpassed many adults. "Ethan," Sarah said softly, "maybe we should let the lawyers—" "What lawyers, Mom?" Ethan interrupted gently. We can't afford to hire Dr. Collins or his colleagues. So either I speak for us or no one speaks. Mark finally found his voice. Ethan, son, I know the situation is confusing for you, but don't call me son, Ethan replied coldly, causing several adults in the room to shiver. In the last 9 years of my life, you've shown up exactly 4 times. 2 birthdays, always 3 weeks late. 1 Christmas when you had 20 minutes free between social engagements, and 1 time when the local press needed a photo with a child for a story on philanthropic entrepreneurs. The silence that followed was palpable. Mark opened his mouth to protest, but Ethan continued. The last time we saw each other was 6 months ago. You spent 15 minutes in our apartment, just long enough to criticize our furniture, complain about the smell of medicine my mother brings home from the hospital, and suggest that I might have potential if I received a proper education. Ethan adjusted his glasses. Interestingly, 2 weeks after that, you filed for custody. Dr. Collins whispered something urgent to Mark, but Ethan wasn't finished. Your Honor, I've done some research on my biological father. I discovered that he recently lost a very expensive lawsuit against his business partners. I also found out that his 3rd wife has filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. And I discovered something very interesting about a trust fund established by my late paternal grandmother. Mark's face drained of color. How had this boy uncovered information that not even his lawyers knew? Ethan turned a page in his notebook, a smile creeping onto his face, one that was not innocent but rather the confident grin of someone holding winning cards. But before we discuss inheritances and financial motives, Ethan said, closing his notebook, let's talk about why a man who never showed any genuine interest in being a father suddenly developed such a strong paternal instinct. Mark was visibly sweating now, and his lawyers looked utterly lost. None of them had prepared to face a child who seemed to know more about their client's financial situation than they did. What had Ethan discovered during his afternoons at the library? How had he managed to gather information that adults with unlimited resources had overlooked? Judge Thompson leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. Ethan, you mentioned evidence. What kind of evidence could a 9-year-old have gathered? Ethan adjusted his glasses again, a gesture that was becoming his trademark. Your Honor, for the past 3 months, since I learned of this lawsuit, I have devoted every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon to researching at the Central Public Library. Researching what? Dr. Collins interrupted condescendingly. Public records, newspaper archives, available corporate documents, Mr. Reynolds' previous court cases. Ethan replied, opening a new section of his notebook. The head librarian, Ms. Johnson, has a master's degree in information science and taught me how to access basic legal databases. Sarah watched her son in awe. For months, Ethan had claimed he was studying for a special project at the library. She never imagined the project was to save his family. Ethan continued methodically. I discovered that in the last 18 months, Mr. Reynolds has faced 3 significant lawsuits. He lost a $2.3 million dispute with former partners in Reynolds Enterprises. His current wife, his 3rd, has filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences, legal code, for he had money from me. Mark's face turned crimson with anger. How dare you? And more interestingly, Ethan interrupted, turning pages methodically, I discovered that my late paternal grandmother, Eleanor Reynolds, established a trust fund of $1.7 million specifically for me, accessible only when I turn 18 or when my biological father obtains full legal custody. The silence in the room was deafening. Dr. Collins whispered something urgent to Mark, who ignored him completely. Your Honor, this is no coincidence, Ethan continued. My grandmother died when I was 2 years old. For 7 years, Mr. Reynolds never mentioned my existence to her, never took me to meet her, never allowed her to know she had a grandson. Sarah remembered it vividly. Mark had been adamant. My family does not need to know about it, referring to his own son as it. But when Eleanor Reynolds discovered my existence through private investigation, something I found in his state records, she immediately set up the fund with one very specific condition. Ethan paused dramatically, knowing everyone in the room was hanging on his every word. The money would be released from my care and education only if my father demonstrated genuine commitment to the child's welfare by obtaining legal custody. If he never sought custody, the money would go directly to me at age 18 with no parental access whatsoever. The math was simple and cruel. Mark had ignored Ethan for 9 years, missing his chance to access the inheritance money through natural custody. Now, desperate and broke, he was trying to force late custody to access the funds. But there's something my grandmother couldn't have foreseen, Ethan said, closing his notebook. She didn't know her son would develop a career in ruining small family businesses through predatory practices. Dr. Collins stood abruptly. Your Honor, this is getting completely out of hand. The child is making baseless accusations. I can prove everything I'm saying, Ethan replied, pulling out a surprisingly organized manila folder from his backpack. I have here copies of 17 lawsuits over the past 5 years where Reynolds Enterprises purchased properties from financially distressed families for well below market value, using insider information obtained through contacts at local banks. Sarah watched her son turn a custody hearing into an impromptu criminal investigation, using only a public library and relentless determination. One of these families, Ethan continued, pulling printed photos from the folder, owned a small bakery. The Martinez family, immigrants who worked 18 hours a day. Mr. Reynolds found out through his friend at the bank that they were 3 months behind on their loan due to the emergency hospitalization of their youngest son. Mark was now visibly sweating. This has nothing to do with... It has everything to do with it, Ethan interrupted, because it shows a pattern of behavior. A man who preys on vulnerable families for financial gain. And now he's trying to prey on his own vulnerable family for the same reason. Judge Thompson leafed through the documents Ethan had presented, his expression growing increasingly serious. Where did you get this information, Ethan? Public court records, local newspaper archives, incorporation document available on the state database. Ethan listed each source meticulously. Ms. Johnson taught me that the truth is almost always publicly available. We just have to know where to look. Dr. Collins made one last desperate attempt. Your Honor, even if these allegations were true, which we are not admitting, they do not change the fact that my client can provide better educational opportunities for the child. Ethan smiled. Not the innocent smile of a child, but the calculated smile of someone who had saved his strongest card for last. About education, he said, opening a final section of his notebook. May I share something interesting about Mr. Reynolds' educational plans for me? It was then that Mark fully understood what he had underestimated. His 9-year-old son wasn't just smart. He was strategic, and he had uncovered secrets that even his own lawyers didn't know. What exactly had Ethan discovered about Mark's true plans for his education? In the silent courtroom, everyone awaited the final revelation that promised to be even more devastating than anything they had heard so far. On the subject of education, Ethan repeated, opening a final section of his notebook with the precision of a surgeon, I would like to share Mr. Reynolds' true educational plans for me. Mark swallowed hard, his eyes darting nervously between his lawyer and the boy who had become his worst nightmare. During one of my 4 visits to him over the past 9 years, Ethan continued methodically, I overheard a very interesting phone conversation. Mr. Reynolds was talking to someone about solving the child problem after obtaining custody. Dr. Collins stood up abruptly. Your Honor, private conversations cannot. I can prove every word. Ethan interrupted, pulling a small digital recorder from his briefcase. Ms. Johnson taught me that documenting evidence is fundamental to any legal case. The silence that followed was deafening. Mark was now visibly shaking, his fingers drumming nervously on the table as he realized he had completely underestimated his own son's intelligence. This recording was made during his last visit to our apartment 6 months ago. Ethan explained calmly to the judge. Mr. Reynolds thought I was doing my homework in my room, but the recorder was left on in the living room. Judge Thompson picked up the device and examined it. Ethan, are you sure you want to present this as evidence? Absolutely certain, Your Honor. The sound of the recording echoed through the silent courtroom. The unmistakable voice of Mark Reynolds spoke into the phone. Listen, as soon as I get legal custody, the boy is going straight to Riverside Military Academy. It's a strict boarding school in Colorado. They know how to handle troubled children. He'll stay there until he's 18, and I have full access to the inheritance funds for educational expenses. The other person's voice was inaudible, but Mark continued, "Exactly. $500 a month for boarding. The rest is mine. The kid doesn't even have to know about the money. It's a perfect solution. She's out of the picture. I have access to the funds, and I still look like a responsible father.